and turn it over to Yves. Thank you,
And
Yves.
I'm going to share my screen. All right, well, thank you for having me and welcome everyone. So I will show you very briefly, why I've been working on COVID and sort of my expertise in this field. So I want to start by just saying that prior to COVID-19, my interest in research was not necessarily in aerosols. Aerosols was part of my research in a way because my research is focused on turbulence and aerosol travel with turbulence. But it came about. The short story is that with my family we were in France for my sabbatical, and the French government asked every researcher who could help to help, and so I assembled a team around aerosol transport, and that's how I started really to work on it. We have now 2 funded projects at UVM that are centered around my work, and so it has become, I think, pretty much one of my long-term research project. So the problem that we have is that, as we all know now, is COVID-19 the main vector of transmission of SARS-CoV-2, of the virus SARS-CoV-2, is through aerosols. And the mitigation measures that that have been shown to work are masking, better ventilation, air purification, and to some extent distancing. We can talk a little more about it, but this is what like an old, relatively old 2016 view of respiratory disease and airborne transmission. So the idea is that you have 2 main routes. The larger droplets that are emitted through coughing and sneezing are subjected to gravity and fall to the ground. They can transmit the disease by contact or fomite route, but much more potent in the case of COVID-19 are the aerosols that unfortunately can stay up in the air for hours, if not days, depending if you are in a very poorly ventilated space. And what it turned out is that the research community did not understand all the aspects of aerosol transport in the air. We still, in fact, discovering new stuff as I speak. But there was a lot of confusion, as you know. The CDC and the WHO took a really long time to recognize that the aerosol route is much more potent than they had assumed from the beginning. And this is why at the beginning we were talking about distancing, we were talking about washing hands, washing surfaces, and now it's not so much the focus anymore. Okay, so it's in this day and age, I think it's very important for me to tell you that the research that we do is really the best we aspire to do and the best we can do. There's I've had many people questioning my work, so it's something us scientists we are used to discuss with our peers, and we can very easily, using math and physics, we can easily prove or disprove the validity of our work. And here, what I want to say is that the few simulations that I'm going to show you are generated from a code that I'm a co-developer on, and in order to give you an idea of the quality of the code, this is the only code that Airbus, from the Safran group, Airbus uses for any simulation of combustion. It is a code that runs on supercomputers. And the reason why this is the only code that Airbus uses is because it has the highest accuracy in its prediction. We simulate flows, combustion, atomization, everything that goes into the combustion in time and space. And this is why we need supercomputers, basically. So here, the idea, the reason why I assembled the team in France was, well, we have one of the best code in the world. There are two like this in the world. One is from Stanford, and the other one is in France. And by the way, all the developers on this code, we are also offshoot of Stanford, where we spent some time. But anyway, the point is, we should apply this code to the problem at hand, which is SARS-CoV-2. Okay, so here is an example of the complexity of the fluid dynamics of aerosol transport. So here, this is a 5-year-old. That simulation was, that's a colleague of mine, a pediatrician at UVM, who asked me to run that simulation. And what you see, the tubes that you see are eddies. You know, what are eddies? Well, there are many tornadoes. They are the engine of turbulence. And the dark spots are aerosols. And the picture that you see is at about, I think, 30 seconds of breathing, right? So like I've let this 5-year-old kid breathe for 30 seconds. And, you know, through the kid's nose come those vortices that evolve into the big eddies that we see here. And you can see that the aerosols are clustered around the eddies. And so basically the eddies transport the aerosols through the room. And it turns out that, you know, we can design airplane and combustion system and everything at high speed. We're really good at this, but we are not so good at predicting that turbulence, right? And so like here, this is an example of aerosols being generated by the nose. So don't worry, here, this is an artifact of my simulation. I have more aerosols coming out of the nose of this mannequin than actually in actual reality. It's a lot easier for me to study the dynamics of the problem with more aerosols than fewer, right? But here the idea is that there is a 2 inch per second wind from left to right. And what you can see in this simulation is that there is a distance of 3 feet between the two individuals. But because of the 2 inch per second wind, well, the aerosols very quickly reach the mannequin on the right. Okay, so so here this is a simulation that I've used to gross out many people, including my entire family. I think I can basically credit this simulation for my kids to be really good at masking. This is what happened when a cough happens. So so here, like the aerosols, sorry, my mechanic's just calling me to tell me that my car is ready. This is what happened when the aerosols, you know, the aerosol stays around the head, but of course the larger droplet fall to the ground by gravity. Okay, and this is the simulation of this kid breathing, and the reason why I'm putting that up, it's 40 seconds of simulation. And the reason why I'm putting this up is that one thing that we didn't really anticipate was at one point, you know, at the beginning, the aerosols move up because the breath coming out of the nose is warmer than the temperature of the room. But very quickly, the buoyancy effect goes away because the aerosol equilibrate to the temperature. And it's really the vortices, the ghost turbulence that are keeping the momentum up. So here's the issue. you have somebody breathing, talking into your library. Things would go up, and then your library has its own airflow due to ventilation, drafts, open window, and so on and so forth. And essentially, those aerosols are going to be picked up and dispersed throughout the room. So, and really the airflow into a room. So here we use what we call Streamline. So essentially, you can think of it of tracers. And here, like this is the tracers coming out of an air purifier and going into a small room and sort of filling up the space. So I'm not showing the lines for everywhere, but you can see the complexity and the turbulence and how this cleaner air comes out and fill the space. And here you have like a view of what the ventilation looks like. It is nearly impossible for us, even with a lot of knowledge, to just look at a room and predict exactly, what the airflows are. We can simulate them. So simulating them with my what we call high fidelity code, my highly accurate code could take months. We have, fortunately enough, lower fidelity codes that can give us a good idea of what's going on in a matter of couple minutes to an hour. So we are developing technique to do that as quickly as possible. But the basic idea is that what we are facing with the library issue, and I want to discuss with you, is really a complex problem. So what can we do? Well, what can we do is really focusing on cleaning air. So one of my efforts, outside of research, has been to try to help schools clean air, and with my family and friends, we've built a bunch of those do-it-yourself air purifiers that are can be built for less than $100. And what they consist of is a box fan, your typical Lowe's or Home Depot box fan for $20. 4 or 5 furnace air purifier panel of ranking of 13 at least, and duct tape, and that's it. That is really all there is to it. And I will see with joy how I can give you, like, there is a Harvard presentation I'm going to show, and there is a link also that I want to share with you that could really help. But essentially, as far as your library is concerned, you are interested in the air change per hour, and when you use an air purifier, the cadre or the clean air delivery rate, right? And there is a link between the two. But the idea here is that the fan sucks the air through the filters and removes a lot of the particles from the air, including aerosols that may contain the virus, and delivers cleaner air, right? And when you let the fan run long enough, you can really reduce the viral load in the air by a lot, 95 to 99%. If you have the right amount of clean air delivery rate for your room. So basic idea here is the air change per hour, right? And so the air change per hour is the flow rate of your fan times 1 hour divided by the volume of your room. So you have to, basically estimate what the volume of your room is, and then we can talk about what can you do. So this is an example of what we built for the Essex Westford School District. And this is what the do-it-yourself purifier looks like. There is a shroud here, and that's to optimize the airflow coming out. It's a nice project, can be done with communities. It is a really fun project to do. It takes about about 15 to 20 minutes to build one. So another aspect that we will talk more into details because is CO2 monitoring. CO2 monitoring can give you a lot of information about the ventilation of your room, about the potential risk of transmission in the room. The ARANET 4 is a very popular CO2 sensor that many of us use. And I will go into more detail with the Harvard presentation onto how you can use that. And one that I have been so far vastly unsuccessful at convincing our local government, our state government to invest in is the upper room UV germicidal irradiation system. This is proven technology. This is actually an old technology, but it works really well for larger rooms. And the way it works is that it shines, as seen here by the pictures from the CDC website, it shines a beam of UV light, which combines with fans, basically cleans up the air, parallel to the ceiling. And again, if you think back at the simulation that I showed you at the beginning with the kids breathing and all the aerosol moving up, this is really where you want to clean the air, right? And so what happens is that the pathogens are sensitive to UV light. They need to be exposed to UV light long enough to actually, for the membrane of the pathogen to collapse and the pathogen to die. So this is why the system works so well. And in fact, in those systems, the equivalent air change per hour can be very significant, much larger than actual ventilation unit. So, like this is like the end of that short presentation. Basically, there are a few myths that you may hear about air purifiers. We've heard schools fighting air purifiers by saying they interfere with ventilation. This is absolutely false. You can have ventilation and air purifiers in the same room. In fact, it's just going to make things better. The worst thing that can happen with an air purifier is, well, a HEPA air purifier at least. The worst thing that can happen is that it's placed poorly and then doesn't really do anything, right? That's the worst thing that happens. We've heard that air purifier can be toxic. That is not true. Air purifier cannot be toxic if they are just HEPA filters. They could with some of the newer technology that is being pushed, like ionizer air purifier. So basically, if you think about, or if you have the budget to buy an air purifier, stick with HEPA air purifiers. Anything else is a gimmick. Ionizers, some of them have been shown to release ozone. You don't want to be in a room with ozone. The ones with UV light, it's just extra money for nothing because the airflow inside the air purifier is too fast. So the pathogen, don't stay long enough to actually be destroyed by the UV light. So it's just an extra cost for nothing.
Yves, can I just interrupt you a second to ask a question from the chat? A couple of people have asked about very high ceilings or very large open space, and if air purifiers are effective in those settings.
Well, yeah, the answer is no. Like for very large ceiling and very open space, we go back to that basic equation here, and now you have the volume of the room, right? Like the volume of the room is at the bottom of your fraction, the denominator of the fraction. So essentially, commercially, like a good air purifier, which like for instance, at home, we have a cone air. The airflow is about, if I remember correctly, like 600 cubic feet per minute. And obviously what would happen, so like in a normal room with an 8-foot ceiling, we are looking at about 6 air change per hour, which is what we want to aspire to. Well, if now you have very high ceiling, you have increased the volume of your room, and so your air change per hour. So let's say that you have 16-foot ceiling. Now my air change per hour goes to 3, right? So air purifiers can work. You're just going to need a lot of them, right? And that's sort of the issue. For very large ceiling, really, this is where the upper room UVGI comes in place, and so the cost of the system is $2,500 per 100 square per 1,000 square feet, right? So for instance, I was looking at Essex High School as a 6,000 square feet cafeteria. We will need 5 of those systems, right? In order, like, because of the geometry of the room, we don't exactly need 6. We will need 5 of the system. So it can be expensive, but one of the main advantage that I see with the upper room UVGI system is really long term. It reduces in the incidence of flu and common cold, and obviously it has the aspect. So that's one solution. The other solution is, Joy, like, maybe I'll ask somebody who asked the question, are we talking about spaces that have no ventilation whatsoever? Are we talking about old building without any ventilation? The one with a high ceiling.
Corey or Karen, if either of you want to unmute and answer his question. Okay, so Karen says no ventilation in the case with the one, hers example was a 15-foot ceiling.
Okay. So in that case, I think air purifiers are really the way to go. So I would say this, I like rooms with very high ceiling, and I think you understand why. Is that the viruses are moving up, right? Like, are going up, and so that's, and also you have a larger volume. So now you're diluting the viral load inside that volume. I feel a lot more comfortable with events that happen in say a stadium, like an indoor stadium with a large volume, than going to the gym into a small room, for instance. So I think, depending on the budget, if there is available funding, that would allow the type of upper room UVGI that I'm talking about, then absolutely. If not, then we can easily figure out how many air purifiers would be needed to achieve the type of air change per hour that is needed. That's so let me switch presentation, and I was developing a presentation for just that, and in fact I realized that I was essentially doing definitely not as good of a job as the Harvard presentation. And so the Harvard, that's something that I want to share with you. So I would send that to Joy, like I guess I can send that to you by email and you can share that,
Yes.
or maybe I was wondering if I could put it in the chat, but apparently I can't.
I can send it out to everyone after.
Okay.
Before you go on, there was a question about the upper room UVGs. Are they available, or is there a shortage on them? Like there are for so many.
No, they are available. And I look, I don't want to get too angry and political, but there is, they are not. Yeah, like schools are not buying them because lack of funding, right? You've all heard that there was a $2 million incentive program for schools that reach vaccination benchmark, and I made the point that $2 million buys 800 UVGI system, right? And I've been vastly unsuccessful at convincing anyone in the Department of Health or Department of Education to do so. I've been in contact with a company in Illinois that sells those systems, and no, they have it's available, definitely. And the way it would work is that you would need to have, I mean, like essentially the company comes and looks at I mean, sends somebody, looks at the system and tells you where to implement it. And the cost itself, I've asked that question. The cost itself is, when I said $2,500, that's with the engineer looking at where to put it and the implementation, right? So that's the whole thing. So there was another question, Joy, that you asked, which was how to estimate the air change power. That was correct?
Yes.
Okay. So the best way to estimate the air change power is, so I'm going to go straight to this. So basically, by the way, this is this presentation and the report that goes with it was the reference for all the schools in Vermont to build their COVID protocol last year, right? Last year, when the Department of Health issued a 40 somewhat page protocol that was based on this, the schools that I've worked with, the school district that I've worked with, have basically used that resource, the Harvard clean room resource or clean air quality resource to guide all the improvement in ventilation that they've done. And so this is why, like I'm basically just showing you this. But yeah, so it starts with, as you understand, estimating what the volume of your room is. And I'm going to skip the audio and measurement. So this is what you can do. The balometer, that's just a system if you have ventilation, which most of you, I would assume most of you don't. That's just a way to measure precisely the flow coming out of your vents. Well, the other way is to use CO2 monitors, and so if you want to run a test when the building is unoccupied, you need to procure some dry ice that is going to release CO2. Otherwise, you can just get a CO2 monitor and wait until the end of the day when you close, and leave the CO2 monitor record a little bit of time, and after everybody has evacuated the building, and then you're going to get the information that you need. So I'm going to jump straight on this when we talk about this. So here is, so the graph is not that great. Like here we are. So essentially, why is CO2 interesting? CO2 is interesting because, as you know, every time that you exhale, you emit CO2. So when there are a lot of people in your library, the CO2 concentration is going to increase inside the room. If you have really good ventilation, that CO2 is going to be evacuated by the ventilation. If you have no ventilation and all the windows are closed, then the CO2 is going to build up. When everybody leaves the room, then the CO2 concentration is going to decrease. And the rate of decrease of the CO2 concentration is going to be based on the natural ventilation of the room, based on the drafts and everything else. So this is why I wanted to, Joy will send you this data, this presentation, because this is really how we estimate using CO2 concentration. So remember that outside the CO2 concentration is about 400 parts per million, okay? Inside inside a residential home, the CO2 concentration tends to be in the 1,000, in about around 1,000 parts per million. In a well-ventilated room, even at full capacity, so for instance, I've worked at UVM, like one of the classrooms that I teach is a fairly small room. It's just at the limit of occupancy, 50 students, and the maximum concentration I have measured so far is 800 parts per million. In newer building, same capacity, same volume, 600 parts per million. So that's excellent air quality. But to go back to the way you can estimate your natural air change per hour, or even if you have ventilation, you can check that the air change per hour matches what the ventilation expert has told you, is that you look at the start of when basically everybody leaves the room, you have a certain concentration, and you let the CO2 concentration reduce to about 37% of that maximum. And then here you basically use that formula with a natural log of the concentration at the end over the concentration at the start, and Tn minus T start, so the time that it took, and that's going to give you the air change per hour. And the idea of the air change per hour, so there is a graph. This is what, this is the accepted air change per hour. So for instance, at UVM, what I've been pushing for, and I think physical plant has been fairly receptive in we want to aspire to 6 air change per hour, and that's at 6 air change per hour you're doing great in terms of reducing the risk of airborne transmission. Now for most of your library, I would expect the air change per hour to be below 3. If you don't have any ventilation, this is where you're going to be. In a nice, like a newer residential home that is fairly tight from the insulation perspective has air change per hour lower than 1. Right, that could be a problem for a whole different host of issues.
Can you answer a question from the chat? Is there any value in using a building energy assessment or blower door test to determine the air change per hour?
It's correlated, but it's not going to give you a good approximation of the air change per hour. It's correlated, right? So basically, if you are in a very drafty building, your air change per hour is going to increase, right? So there's an advantage in being into an older drafty building. Your natural ventilation is higher, and so your air change per hour is better. One thing that is really important to think of, if you're going to use CO2 sensors to estimate your air change per hour, and let's say that you don't have any ventilation, right? Well, if then you decide to add air purifiers, keep in mind that your CO2 concentration is no longer a good indication. If you have air purifier running into your room, it's no longer an indication of the risk of airborne transmission, because the air purifiers do nothing for CO2, right? So if you have a room with very poor ventilation with a low air change per hour, well, the CO2 concentration is going to grow with the occupancy, and there is nothing you can do about it. But if you have the right number of air purifiers, the air purifiers are going to take care of the airborne virus. Does that make sense?
I think so. There are a couple questions too about the placement of the air purifiers. Is it better to have them higher off the ground?
So I'm just positioning my chat here. Okay. So I'm very sad to tell you that this is why I just got a 3-year grant to work on this. It's because it's going to take us 3 years to answer that question without any doubt, because the issue is that the best positioning of air purifier depends on the geometry of your room, on the design of your room. And so right now I can tell you that it doesn't matter so much if it's off the ground. If you build one of those do-it-yourself air purifier and you build the 5-panel one, you want it to be off the ground so that the bottom panel actually can suck air in. You remember that the air purifier is going to blow the air up. You want the air purifier as much as possible disseminated throughout the room, and especially at the center of the room, right? Air purifier on the edge of the room, that's less efficient. You really need to have a specific setup that again is going to depend very much on the lights in your room, how your ceiling is built, and so many questions. So my recommendation is that if you going with the air purifiers, try to put them at the center of the room as much as possible, not in a clump, like disperse them a little bit. Yeah.
And there were some questions about overhead fans, good or bad?
So they again, overhead fan can be good. It depends how they are positioned. So now I've lost my we've had like, hang on, I'm just trying to get my Harvard window back up. Here we go. Yeah, we go. All right. So in terms of natural, like natural ventilation, or like having, like when you open, we are getting to the point where we unfortunately we won't be able to open windows for much longer, maybe not even today, but like having airflow through the room that is basically like gets fresh air into the room and pushes air out is great. Absolutely. Like we want that. Like here in this room, the single opening is like they say good. I would say, well, it's it's better than nothing, but it's definitely not ideal. And what's going to happen in that single opening is that there is very little air replacement that is happening in the corners that we know, and the best is the two opening of opposite. So yes, definitely air fans. Window fan can be good if you have a high room and you can place window fan sort of in an exhaust higher, because remember the virus are going to go up first before they're going to get picked up by some airflow in your room and come down on you. So if you can push the air out up high and make fresh air come in down below, that could help.
For the people who had questions about the overhead fans, do you feel like that clarified it, or are you still wondering about? I think they were specifically talking about like the fans that are, built into the building, and they sometimes use them in the winter to like bring the warm air down.
Oh, those fans. Oh yeah. I'm so sorry. I didn't get that. It will help in combination with the air purifiers. So essentially, like one thing that we are seeing with the simulations that we are doing is that the more airflow, the more dilution of pathogen, of airborne virus we see, right? And one of the issues that I have with air purifier is that, well, the jet of clean air is coming out at about what's the speed? About a few tens of inches per, like, well, it's about a foot per second. And it's sucking the air from the side, typically, whether it's commercial or do-it-yourself. So, but at a really slow speed. So it's not like the air purifiers are drawing vast amount of air, or at least over large distance. It's the air that is local. So having overhead fan is basically helping you diluting the concentration of aerosols throughout the room, and also bringing more aerosols to those air purifiers. So yeah, actually that is a really good point. That's something we can look at in coming weeks to see what will be the effect. But my feeling, based on everything that we've seen so far, is that more flow, better.
And there's a question: should the fans draw the air up or push it down?
So again, like if you place the air purifiers, right, like around the fans. So if you place the air purifiers around the fan, you're pushing clean air up. So you want those fans at the top to push that clean air down, right? Which will also help any aerosol that want to rise up, go down and get into the air purifiers, into the filters of the air purifiers. I want to show you something quickly on this, which is a simulation that here we go. So we are just starting a collaboration with NIOSH. So NIOSH is the research branch of CDC, and they just published this really nice experiment. So it's a small conference room. The panels that you see are ceiling ventilation. So they do have a ventilation, but it's not great ventilation. They actually lower the ventilation to 2 air change per hour. And essentially, they have 4 mannequins. They have a source that generate aerosols, and they have a whole system that measure the number of aerosols that the speaker and the participant A and participant B are inhaling from the source. And they use, for each experiment, they use 2 HEPA air cleaner. And, you know, for instance, one of the configuration, they place the HEPA air cleaner just behind the source. Another configuration, they place one on the left, one on the right. And the last configuration, it's like front and back. And there is one configuration where the HEPA filters have been raised. So by the way, this is what the experiment looked like, and we've been charged to run those simulations, which was really key for us to get some experimental data. So we are just starting to run those simulations. But here's the beauty of the experiment, and something that you know, if you need to convince anyone about masking and air purification, that's, to me, is right there. So here, this, you know, without getting into too much detail, they have a way to measure basically like the number of aerosol that's been inhaled. And so when there is no HEPA cleaners, that's sort of the baseline, and you can see that the 2 participants and the speaker do inhale a lot. As soon as you put air purifiers into the room, you decrease that relative concentration of inhaled aerosols by at least 40%, right? But you know, more around 50%. And when you mask everybody, you know, that's when you really get into very low risk, right? So if someone needed any justification why universal mask should be enforced in library, well, that's one. That's right, yeah.
There's a question: was this experiment done with what type of masks was used for this?
It was surgical, so not ideal from my perspective, because surgical masks have holes, right? Like the fit is not. So the material of surgical mask is really good. It's been shown, it's been demonstrated multiple times. The fabric, the polymers that is used is the same type of polymer is used for N95 mask. It's a really nice mask. The issue with the surgical mask is the fit around the nose and the cheeks, and sometimes under the chin. And in fact, I don't remember the exact reference, but I remember reading that you know, the efficacy of a really good mask drops dramatically as soon as it's not fitted well. So meaning like a mask that would be 95% that have 95% efficacy, if the fit is poor, the efficacy drops to 60%. So part of it here is here the efficacy of the mask. I would recommend to all of you, since you're going to be indoors for quite a while, to really you know, look at the website that I will share with you through Joy, called cleanaircrew.org, that has a bunch of recommendations on masks. N95, KN95, KF94 are really good masks, and finding a mask that fits you is really key. There are also elastomeric respirators that some of them don't look like the ones that you see painters with, but they look less weird, I would say. And those, in fact, provide added protection compared to the N95 mask. Like, for instance, I'm supposed to travel to England this winter, something that I don't really want to, but I can't pass by the opportunity. I will be flying with an elastomeric respirator.
There was a couple questions actually earlier about UV filters in a hot air furnace. Does that help?
Yes. Yeah, because a hot air furnace, typically, especially in Vermont, is going to recycle air, right? So ventilation in Vermont, like, you know, any type of ventilation. When we talk about ventilation, like, for instance, I've dealt with that a lot with teachers who came to me and say, my room is super hot, there is no ventilation. I'm like, no, there is ventilation. It's just the ventilation system does not have a heat exchanger to cool the air, right? And so that's the big issue that we've seen in schools, and especially those first days of the fall when it was really hot and humid. The schools were pushing as much fresh air into the ventilation system as they could. It's just they have no capacity to dehumidify and cool the air. So what happened is that when it gets really cold in the ventilation furnace, is that when you have forced air, you recycling the air of the room. Why? Because this air is already hot, right? So it costs a lot less energy to reheat hot air than to heat, 4-degree air from outside. So having typically those I'm not an expert at those UV system into furnaces, but like essentially like those furnaces should be equipped with at least MERV 13 filters. And from what I gather, the UV system into it are actually doing something. They are designed to actually kill pathogen. So yes.
Are there other questions?
What if your HVAC system cannot work with MERV 13 filters? Well, that's when you need to supplement this HVAC system with air purifiers.
Could you say again the type of mask you're going to wear when you travel abroad?
So I'm still looking at it. There is one called Envo mask. Let me show you. I should have. Yes, I have this right here. So here, like on my screen. So I will send that resource. It is a fantastic resource. It started. It's a bunch of my colleagues, of academics who actually have devoted their entire life to bioaerosol, to air quality, and so the entire research. And they basically have gathered everything. Here we go. Like, yeah, I can see that somebody shared the link. So that's the link indeed. And so as far as the elastomeric respirator, this is what they recommend. The quick story behind it is that there is only one hospital in the entire US, and that's the story here, that's where no healthcare worker has been infected by COVID-19. And that's the one hospital that back in 1996 invested in elastomeric respirator for all the healthcare workers. And of course, like this is the Center for Infectious Disease, so it makes kind of sense. But also, the hospital made the calculation that they were actually going to save money in the long run by not having their healthcare workers sick. And also, in fact, it turns out to be cheaper than N95. So, like here, you have a bunch of masks, and if you are weirded out by the 3M mask type, you know, like it's kind of, you look more like Star Wars-ish. The ENVO mask, you know, there are experts like in the Clean Air Crew. There is one of my one of my colleagues that you know has become a friend, like Andrew. He's professor at University of Denver. He swears by it. Like he actually went to a hotel with poor ventilation and slept with the ENVO mask. So we are one of those libraries with limitations. So we are planning to augment with some partially open windows. That's true. That's good. Well, the open windows, the issue with the open windows is that how long can you so JC, like I'm responding to JC, how long do you plan to have open windows, right? I mean, like, and the issue with the open window is then you're going to see a significant increase in your heating cost. So this is again where I think looking at your community and calling upon your community to make those air purifiers, so that you effectively increase the air change per hour from the perspective of airborne viral load, right? And get to the point where you feel comfortable, like you have an air change per hour that is about 6. So I can send you, I need to find that calculation, but I do have like a quick example of a calculation. If you have your ventilation as an air change per hour of 2, then, you know, this is how how you calculate the air change per hour, or the capacity of air change per hour needed for air purifier to get to an effective air change per hour of 6.
Okay, well, we are at the end of the hour. Thank you so much. This was so informative, and thank you for being so receptive to the questions. I will send out all the things to everybody that attended that he's mentioned that he will share with us. And I did put a link to a short evaluation in the chat. I'll send that out again with the resources as well. So thank you so much. Thank you for coming, everybody, and be safe.
Yeah, be safe. Thank you so much. Bye.